There's a moment in everyone's life when they get sick and tired of their own story. Sick of saying they want to change, but never following through. Sick of talking about goals, dreams, and possibilities, but living the same day on repeat. And in that moment, a shift happens. Not because the world changes, but because they do. That shift is called a decision, not a preference, not a hope, a decision. And that decision, when made with absolute certainty, has the power to change your life today. Now hear this. Most people never make real decisions. They confuse decisions with wishes. Wish I could get fit. Wish I had more money. I wish I had better relationships. That's not a decision. That's a fantasy. A true decision cuts off all other possibilities. It's when you draw a line in the sand and say, "This ends now. I'm not going back. I will change this." It's a moment of internal revolution. You've had those moments before. You know what I'm talking about. A moment when you finally said, "Enough." Maybe it was after a breakup, when you looked in the mirror and said, "No more settling." Maybe it was when you opened another credit card bill and felt that surge of embarrassment and anger. This ends now. Maybe it was standing on the scale and realizing you didn't recognize the person staring back at you. In those moments, you weren't just thinking, you weren't hoping, you decided, you felt it in your gut, in your chest, in your spine. You shifted from passive observer to powerful creator. That's the kind of decision I'm talking about. Most people are stuck because they're waiting for permission. They're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect motivation. But successful people, they decide first. They commit before the plan is perfect. They act before the motivation kicks in. They don't tiptoe into change. They storm the gates. Because they understand something critical. The moment you make a real decision, everything starts to move. The universe responds. Your brain responds. Your body responds. Clarity replaces confusion. Energy replaces hesitation. But here's the trap. People think change takes time. It doesn't. What takes time is the moment before the decision. You could spend 10 years saying you want to start a business, get healthy, or change your relationship. 10 years of talking. 10 years of excuses. But the change itself, that happens in an instant. The moment you decide, you are no longer the same person. Your identity shifts. The old story dies. That's the power of absolute certainty. When you decide with certainty, your brain stops negotiating. When you're certain, doubt doesn't get a vote. And most people live in hesitation because they haven't trained themselves to decide and own that decision. They keep the back door open. I'll try this new habit, but if it gets uncomfortable, I'll quit. That's not a decision. That's a setup for failure. Burn the boats. Make it non-negotiable. Let me be clear, it's not about being reckless. It's about being resolute. It's about saying, "This is who I am now." Because your identity is the thermostat for your life. You will always act consistently with who you believe you are. If you believe you're someone who can't change, you'll keep proving that story true. But the moment you decide, truly decide, that you are done with your old limitations, done with your excuses, done with being almost the person you know you could be, you start acting like the version of you that you were always meant to be. Don't overthink it. Don't overanalyze. You already know what needs to change. You already know the habits that are killing your progress. You already know the relationships that are draining your power. You already know what you've been avoiding. It's not lack of knowledge. It's lack of decision. And the reason that decision hasn't been made is because you haven't made it must. You've let it remain a should. Lose weight? You should. Get organized? You should. Ask for that raise. But shoulds don't change lives. Musts do. You have to elevate the emotional intensity behind your decision. You've got to feel it in your nervous system. If you're casual, you'll become a casualty. Decide like your life depends on it, because it does. Every day you delay the decision, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who waits. And life doesn't reward the hesitant, it rewards the bold, the committed, the all-in. So if you want to change your life today, don't wait for some cosmic sign. Don't wait for the right mood. Don't wait for New Year's or Monday or your next birthday. Decide right now, right here. With your whole being, plant your flag in the ground and say, "This is the day it changes. This is the day I change." If you want to change your life today, the first thing you've got to look at isn't your goals, it's your standards. Goals are dreams with deadlines. They're important, but they're not what shapes your life in the long term. Standards are what shape your destiny. Because you don't always get what you want, you get what you tolerate, you get what you accept, you get what your standards demand of you. Every result in your life right now is a reflection of your standards. The quality of your health, the state of your relationships, your bank account, your emotional well-being. None of it is random. It's the byproduct of what you've deemed acceptable or unacceptable. You've trained yourself to live at a certain level, and until that standard changes, nothing else will. People say, I want more energy, I want to get in shape, but their standards are still at the level of comfort food and skipping workouts. They say, I want to be wealthy, but their standards are still paycheck to paycheck thinking, overspending, and avoiding tough financial conversations. You can scream about your goals all day long, but if your standards say otherwise, guess what wins? Standards always override desires when they're in conflict. Raising your standards is not about positive thinking. It's about identity. It's saying, I will no longer be this person. I am not available for this version of myself. When you change what you're willing to accept in your life, you start to behave differently. And when you behave differently long enough, you start getting results that match that new standard. Think about people who transform their lives in a massive way. Maybe someone who loses 100 pounds, or someone who goes from broke to financially free, or someone who leaves a toxic relationship and builds an incredible life on their own terms. In every case, the transformation began with a shift in standard. They raised the bar on what they were willing to live with. They said, this is not me anymore. I refuse to settle for less than I'm capable of. That wasn't a casual shift. That was a radical commitment. What's interesting is how quickly the world responds when your standards go up. It's like everything aligns around your new level of expectation. You speak differently. You walk differently. You start holding others and yourself to a new level of accountability. You stop wasting time on things that used to distract you because those things no longer match the identity you've stepped into. But raising your standards is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront your own patterns. You can't raise your standards and keep the same habits. You can't raise your standards and keep hanging around people who are dragging you down. You can't raise your standards and keep lying to yourself about why you haven't changed. That's why most people won't do it. They'd rather stick with familiar misery than step into unfamiliar excellence. Here's the truth: success is not about resources. It's about standards. You can lack education, money, connections, and still win if your standards are unshakable. Because when your standards are high enough, you will find a way. You'll become resourceful. You'll wake up earlier. You'll study harder. You'll outwork people. You'll ask for help. You'll knock on doors. You'll get rejected and show up again. You'll stretch and fight and claw your way into a better reality. Because your current one is no longer acceptable. You've got to ask yourself, right now, what are the areas in your life where you've lowered the bar? Where have you been tolerating mediocrity? What are you putting up with that you know is beneath you? It could be your physical body. It could be how you show up for your kids. It could be your income, your emotional discipline, your level of contribution. Be brutally honest with yourself, because change doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in confrontation. Raising your standards isn't about perfection. It's about never going back to the old version of yourself. That means when you slip, you catch yourself faster. That means when you feel yourself drifting, you correct the course immediately. That means you hold yourself to a code, and that code becomes non-negotiable. You don't wait for the mood to strike. You don't wait to feel ready. Your standard is your ready. Your standard is your reason. Your standard is your leverage. This is what separates the few from the many. Most people lower their standards to match their environment. They shrink their vision to avoid disappointment. They settle so they don't have to stretch. But leaders, champions, game changers, they do the opposite. They raise their standards and force the environment to rise to them. They don't walk into the room adapt. They walk into the room and lead it. That's the power of personal standards. They don't just guide your behavior. They dictate how the world treats you. You teach the world how to treat you by what you tolerate. You teach people how to value your time, your worth, your energy, by the standards you live by. When you raise those standards, you no longer need to scream for respect. You command it, not because you're arrogant, but because you live congruent with your highest values. You become the example, not the echo. And if you're serious about changing your life today, then you've got to be ruthless about this. No more soft talk. No more sugarcoating. Raise the standard on your health. Raise it on your discipline. Raise it on your work ethic. Raise it on your relationships. Look at every area of your life and say, what's the new minimum I will accept from myself? And what does the best version of me demand instead? You want to change your life today. You better learn how to change your state, not tomorrow, not later, now. Because your state, the mental, emotional, and physical condition you're in at any given moment, is the foundation of every decision you make. Every behavior, every reaction, every breakthrough. It all starts with state. Most people live at the mercy of how they feel. If they wake up tired, they drag themselves through the day. If someone cuts them off in traffic, they stay angry for hours. If they don't feel motivated, they don't act. Their life is ruled by random emotion, as if their internal thermostat is controlled by someone else. But that's not how the most powerful people live. That's not how change happens. If you want to shift your results, you've got to first take control of your state. Because when you change your state, you change your decisions, and when you change your decisions, you change your destiny. Your state is a triad. It's made up of three forces in your physiology, your focus, and your language. You want to feel unstoppable. You can create that state within minutes, sometimes seconds, just by shifting these three elements. But most people have never been taught how to do it, so they repeat the same emotional patterns for years and wonder why their life doesn't change. Let's start with physiology. Your body is the fastest tool to shift your state. You cannot feel depressed when you stand tall, breathe deep, and move with power. You can't feel hopeless when you jump up and down, clench your fists, shout with certainty, and move like a champion. The problem is, most people have trained their bodies into sluggish, defeated, low-energy patterns. They walk like they're carrying the weight of the world. They breathe like they're barely alive. They sit like they're waiting to disappear, and their state reflects it. If you want to feel different, move different. Don't wait to feel confident. Stand up and breathe like someone who is confident. Move like someone who gets things done. Speak like someone who owns their mission. You train your emotional state through repetition, just like you train your muscles. You don't go to the gym once and expect to be strong. You don't move with certainty once and expect to live with power. You do it every single day, until it becomes who you are. Then there's focus. Where focus goes, energy flows. Change your focus, change your life. In every moment, your brain is filtering millions of pieces of information, but you only consciously focus on a few. If you focus on what's missing, you'll feel frustrated. If you focus on what can't control, you'll feel powerless. If you focus on what could go wrong, you'll hesitate. But if you focus on what's possible, you are grateful for what you can do right now. You enter a state of strength. You enter a state of action. Your brain is a meaning-making machine, and it will find whatever you feed it. If you ask, why does this always happen to me? Your mind will serve up every failure and shortcoming you've ever experienced. But if you ask, how can I use this? Your brain shifts into problem-solving mode. That's the power of focus. It turns the same event to either a burden or a gift, pain into purpose, chaos into strategy. Your focus is your steering wheel. You want to change your direction. Grab that wheel and turn it intentionally. And then there's language. The words you use don't just describe your reality, they shape it. You can take the same experience and use different language to completely alter how you feel. Someone might say, I'm overwhelmed. Another person might say, I'm stretched. One feels like a victim, the other feels like they're growing. Words matter. If you say you're devastated, you'll feel emotionally crushed. If you say you're figuring it out, you'll feel momentum. The language you speak becomes the script your mind follows. Most people use the same disempowering language out of habit. They've trained themselves to talk about their life as if it's happening to them, not because of them. But the moment you upgrade your language, you upgrade your emotional blueprint. You start to build a vocabulary of strength, not survival. Of action, not excuses. You shift from, I can't to I must. From maybe to absolutely. And when your language becomes consistent with your goals, your emotions start to follow. When you understand that your state is something you can control, life stops happening to you, and you start creating it. You're no longer the puppet of your circumstances, you become the master of your experience. That doesn't mean you'll never feel down or discouraged. It means you'll know exactly how to shift it, how to break the pattern, how to stand up and decide, this is not how my day ends. This is not how my story goes. You people wait for motivation. They wait for inspiration. But those are unreliable. What you need is mastery of your state. Because when you control your state, you don't need to wait. You can generate. You can feel focused even when you're tired. You can feel driven even when things fall apart. You can feel certain even when the world is uncertain. Because your power doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. That shift is everything. It's not just about feeling good, it's about feeling strong, resourceful, clear, and focused when it counts. In the boardroom, on the stage, at home with your kids, in the moments when fear shows up, in the moments when you feel like backing down, your ability to step into a peak state on command is the secret weapon of every high achiever. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between repeating the past and rewriting your future. If you're not living the life you want, it's not because you're broken. It's not because you're not smart enough, not disciplined enough, or not lucky enough. It's because you're stuck in patterns. Patterns that were installed in you over time, through repetition, emotion, and reinforcement. And until you interrupt those limiting patterns, you will continue to recycle the same results, the same frustrations, the same stuck story. Change isn't about hoping for a better outcome. It's about breaking the loop that keeps you where you are and choosing something radically different. Right now, on your terms. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It's constantly searching for ways to conserve energy, to automate behavior, to create shortcuts. That's useful when you're tying your shoes or driving to work, but it's dangerous when the patterns you're repeating are self-sabotaging. When you get stressed, you overrate. When you feel fear, you freeze. When you fail, you withdraw. When things get hard, you quit. Those aren't random behaviors. They are learned responses, conditioned patterns. And the only reason they still show up is because you haven't interrupted them with something more powerful. Most people try to change their life by trying harder. They use willpower to battle against deeply ingrained emotional triggers. But willpower is like a muscle. It fatigues. It's unreliable over the long term. What creates lasting change is not effort alone. It's pattern interruption. It's when you recognize the exact moment the old loop tries to kick in and you slam the brakes. You disrupt the signal. You scramble the script. And in that space, you insert a new conscious choice. It starts with awareness. You cannot change what you don't understand. You've got to catch the pattern in real time. Not just after the damage is done, but in the moment the first impulse rises. That moment when your energy drops, and you instinctively reach for your phone to scroll. That moment when you feel insecure, and you start comparing yourself to everyone else. That moment when the argument starts, and you go into shutdown mode. Those are not just emotions. Those are cues. They are the doorways into the deeper programming that has to be rewritten. So what do you do when you catch it? You break the rhythm. You use your physiology, your voice, your focus. Anything to create a shock to the system. Emotion is what built the pattern, and emotion is what can destroy it. Change your body posture, shout something ridiculous, jump, laugh, scream, clap. Whatever it takes to interrupt the unconscious behavior. The brain doesn't change through information alone. It changes through intensity, through disruption, through experiences that jar it out of autopilot. It's not enough to just stop the pattern. You've got to replace it with something more empowering. If you always go into anxiety in certain situations, break the cycle and anchor a new state of calm and strength. If you always react with anger when criticized, catch the reaction and replace it with curiosity and control. That takes practice. That takes commitment. But every time you succeed, you weaken the old neural pathway and strengthen a new one. Eventually, you were trained. What was once automatic is no longer your default, because you rewired the loop through conscious choice. People say they want to change, but then they keep feeding the same patterns with the same stories. This is just how I am. I've always been like this. It runs in my family. Those stories are the glue that hold the pattern together. And as long as you keep telling yourself that narrative, you'll keep finding ways to make it true. So part of the pattern break is not just physical, it's mental. You've got to destroy the old identity that's tied to the behavior. You've got to tell a new story, one that aligns with who you're becoming, not who you've been. You are not your patterns. You are your past. You are not your trauma. You are the creator of what comes next. But you cannot create from a place of unconscious repetition. You've got to wake up. You've got to notice the loop. You've got to feel the urge and not follow it. That moment right there, that's the window of transformation. That's where all your power lies. Not in pretending you're perfect, but in mastering the micro moments when the old you tries to resurface and you say, not this time. The truth is, you don't need to be fixed. You just need to break the chain. You need to stop rehearsing the same reactions and upgrade your emotional software. And the beautiful part, once you've done it once, you can do it again. You can break the pattern around procrastination, around money, around relationships, around your health. Because the formula is the same: become aware, interrupt the pattern with intensity, replace it with something empowering, and reinforce it through repetition. Repetition is key. One interruption is a start, but permanent change happens when you reinforce the new behavior over and over until it becomes your new normal. That's how you become unrecognizable. That's how you look back 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, and barely remember the person who used to react, retreat, or self-sabotage. Because that person no longer runs the show. Because you no longer run on default. Whatever you consistently focus on, you move toward. That's not philosophy. It's physics of achievement. The mind, like a laser, is capable of incredible breakthroughs, but only if it's focused. Most people don't have a lack of intelligence, a lack of potential, or even a lack of opportunity. What they lack is focus. They're scattered. They're pulled in 10 directions at once. Their attention is hijacked by social media, constant notifications, meaningless problems, and the noise of the world. They're busy being busy, but they're not going anywhere. They wonder why they feel overwhelmed, anxious, behind. It's because their energy is diffused. But when you take all of that energy and concentrate it in one direction, you unleash power. Focus is power. It's fuel. It's fire. It's the ability to take the chose of your life and slice through it with clarity and precision. When you focus, you control the narrative. You decide what matters. You stop reacting and you start creating. You stop being a passenger in your life and take the wheel with both hands. That's the difference between movement and progress. People are moving all the time, but progress only happens when there's focus. Focus creates momentum. The more you pay attention to something, the more that part of your life expands. You focus on problems, your problems grow. You focus on possibility, your opportunities expand. It's not magic, it's how the brain is wired. What you consistently think about becomes your filter. It becomes your identity. Your focus is not just shaping your results, it's shaping who you are. You've got to decide, what is worthy of my focus? What deserves my attention? Not everything does. Not every fight is yours to fight. Not every distraction is worth the mental real estate. If you focus on things you cannot control, what people think, what the economy is doing, what might go wrong, you will feel powerless. But if you focus on what you can control, your attitude, your habits, your effort, your vision, then no matter what the world throws at you, you're still moving forward. That's how you build mental dominance. You take control of your focus like a warrior sharpens a blade. You protect it. You discipline it. Because unfocused people live in emotional chaos. They're pulled into every argument, every crisis, every shiny distraction that comes along. And the problem with that is, you cannot live an extraordinary life if your attention is constantly fractured. Greatness requires sustained focus. It requires being able to look past the noise and lock in on what matters most, over and over again. You want to build a business, transform your body, elevate your mindset, deepen your relationships. That's not going to happen with half-hearted focus. It's not going to happen if you're constantly switching gears, chasing novelty, or letting fear dictate your next move. Success in any area demands that you concentrate your energy. It demands that you say no, again and again, to the things that don't align with your mission. Focus is not just about what you say yes to. It's about what you say no to, what you eliminate, what you ruthlessly cut out so you can channel your intensity into something that actually moves the needle. People who win in life are not smarter. They're more focused. They don't allow other people to dictate what gets their energy. They don't chase everything. They choose. They commit. They narrow in. That's what makes them unstoppable. And the truth is, most people are afraid to focus because it forces them to stop hiding. When you really focus, there are no more excuses. You either execute or you don't. You either grow or you stay stuck. That kind of clarity can be terrifying if you're used to living in distraction. But that's where freedom lies. When you narrow your focus, you strip away the noise and face what's real. You stop chasing 1,000 little goals and start pursuing one thing with massive intensity. And when you pour that kind of focused energy into something, the results don't just add up, they multiply. 1 year of focused execution is worth 10 years of scattered effort. That's not an exaggeration. That's reality for anyone who's ever gone all in on a mission and refused to get distracted. Focus also determines your emotional state. If you focus on what's wrong, you'll feel frustrated. If you focus on what's missing, you'll feel empty. But if you focus on how far you've come, what you're capable of, and what you can create next, you'll feel strong. You'll feel grateful. You'll feel motivated. Your emotions are not just a result of your circumstances. They're a result of your focus. You change your focus, you change your feelings. You change feelings, you change your behavior. You change your behavior, you change your life. So you've got to train yourself. Every morning, instead of diving into chaos, ask, what is my focus today? What will move me forward? What can I control? Write it down. Speak it out loud. Keep it in front of you. Every time you feel distracted or overwhelmed, come back to that. Anchor yourself in the vision. Remind yourself what matters. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. Because if you don't decide what to focus on, the world will decide for you. The algorithm will. The media will. Your fears will. Your insecurities will. And they will lead you in 100 directions that feel urgent but produce nothing meaningful. The world is full of noise, full of demands, full of things screaming for your attention. But if you want to live a life that means something, you've got to be the one who decides what gets through. Your destiny is not written in your circumstances. It's written in your decisions. One decision, made with absolute clarity and full emotional commitment, can alter the trajectory of your life in seconds. Not next week, not next month, right now. And yet, most people treat decisions like they're optional, like they can delay, defer, avoid, or delegate them. But the truth is, every moment you're alive, you are deciding, whether intentionally or by default. And the quality of your life comes down to the quality of those decisions. People think change is slow, but that's a lie. Change is instant. What takes time is getting ready to make the decision. What takes time is hesitating, doubting, analyzing, looping in fear. But when the moment comes, when you finally decide enough is enough, your life pivots in a heartbeat. You cut the cord. You burn the bridge. You make the move. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck or hard the path has been. The minute you decide with certainty, everything begins to shift. That's the power most people never tap into. They let life happen to them. They wait to feel ready, wait for perfect timing, wait for someone else's permission. But waiting is a decision. Indecision is a decision. And the longer you stay stuck between choices, the more energy you waste, the more confidence you drain, and the more life you leave unlived. You want to change your body? Decide. You want to launch the business? Decide. You want to let go of the past and build a future that lights your soul on fire? Decide. Because nothing moves until you do. You don't need more time. You need a defining moment. And that moment happens when you draw a line in the sand and say, I will no longer tolerate this. That's when your standard changes. And your standards create your outcomes, not your wishes, not your goals. Your standards. You will always get what you settle for. If you accept a mediocre relationship, a toxic environment, a body you don't feel proud of, or a life you're not lit up by, then that becomes your normal. Until the moment you decide you want more. Real decisions cut off all other options. That's where the word comes from. Decide, like homicide, suicide. It means to kill off every other possibility. When you make a real decision, you eliminate the back door. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop explaining your limitations. You stop dancing with comfort and instead marry commitment. And that shift, that inner resolve, that fierce clarity, that's when momentum starts to work in your favor. That's when the world begins to rearrange around your conviction. Don't confuse a preference with a decision. Everyone prefers to be happy. Everyone would like to be wealthy, healthy, fulfilled. But a decision requires action. A decision demands sacrifice. A decision costs comfort. That's why most people never make them. They want the outcome, but they're not willing to give up the excuses, the patterns, the old identity that's keeping them stuck. They say things like, I'll try, maybe, we'll see, I hope, but those are not the words of someone who's decided. When you've truly decided, it sounds different. It feels different. There's no hesitation, no confusion, just action. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But when you decide, difficulty doesn't stop you. It fuels you. It sharpens your edge. It forges your resilience, because the path of growth is never about avoiding struggle. It's about choosing a direction so compelling, so non-negotiable, that no obstacle can pull you off course. That's what makes a powerful decision. It creates focus. It simplifies your life. It organizes your behavior. It shuts down distractions and puts you on a collision course with who you were meant to become. Think about the moments in your life where everything changed. It wasn't luck. It wasn't someone else. It was a decision to leave the job, to walk away from the relationship, to commit fully to the mission, to invest in yourself, to take the leap even though fear was screaming in your ear. Those moments define you, not because they were perfect, but because they were yours, because you stopped waiting, because you said yes to your higher self and no to the story that kept you small. Your story changes the moment your decisions change. You don't need a new year. You don't need another course. You don't need a guru or a permission slip. You need to take ownership, to stop outsourcing your future to circumstance or chance. Every single day, you have the power to decide what you will tolerate, what you will pursue, what you will believe, how you will show up. That's the most liberating truth there is. You are not a product of your environment. You are a product of your decisions. Even in chaos, you can choose certainty. Even in fear, you can choose courage. Even in doubt, you can choose to act. That's where all your leverage lives. Not in control, but in choice. And when you make powerful decisions over and over again, you build something stronger than talent, stronger than luck. You build character. You build momentum. You build a life that reflects your deepest values, not your deepest fears. If you want to change your life, don't start with your goals. Start with your standards. Your standards are the invisible thermostat of your life. They regulate what you allow, what you expect, and what you ultimately experience. You don't get what you want. You get what you tolerate. You get what you believe you're worth. And the moment you raise your standards, the world responds. Not because the world changes, but because you do. Your decisions change. Your behavior changes. Your energy shifts. You stop playing small and start aligning your actions with a higher version of yourself. It's easy to talk about transformation. People love to dream big, to create vision boards, to write down lofty intentions. But none of it means anything if your standards stay low. If you still accept mediocrity in your health, in your relationships, in your finances, then you'll keep getting the same average results. Nothing shifts until you say, "This is no longer acceptable. This is beneath who I am." And when that internal standard rises, everything else has to rise with it. That's not motivational fluff. That's the truth that separates those who grow from those who stay stuck. Your standards define the floor of your life, not the ceiling. They set the minimum of what you will settle for. You want to see someone's real standards. Don't listen to what they say. Watch how they live. Look at what they do every single day, especially when it's inconvenient. Look at how they treat their body or environment, their relationships, their commitments. That's the real scoreboard. That's where transformation lies. Not in the big, bold declarations, but in the small, consistent rituals that reflect an unshakable identity. Rituals are the backbone of your standards. Without rituals, your standards are just intentions. But with rituals, they become habits. They become automatic. When you raise your standards, you're making a declaration of who you are. But when you build rituals around those standards, you make it sustainable. It's one thing to say, "I demand excellence from myself." It's another thing to get up at 5 a.m., fuel your body, move with intensity, and spend time conditioning your mind every single day. That's how standards become a lifestyle. Most people don't have poor goals. They have poor rituals. They want to feel confident, but they don't prime themselves every morning to enter the day in a peak emotional state. They want to be wealthy, but they don't manage their money with intention. They want deep love, but they don't put in the consistent effort to nurture connection. They want to feel alive, but they don't move their body. They don't feed it well. They don't breathe deeply. They don't challenge themselves. They're waiting for results without earning them. But life doesn't reward desire. It rewards disciplined action. It rewards consistent alignment with the standards you claim to live by. That's where rituals come in. Rituals are the daily demonstrations of your standards. They don't have to be massive. They just have to be non-negotiable. It could be waking up without hitting snooze. It could be drinking a full glass of water before anything else enters your body. It could be journaling for 10 minutes to get your mind focused. It could be visualizing your outcome before you start your work. The power isn't in the ritual itself. It's in what it represents. It's a message to yourself and the universe self. This is who I am now. When you install empowering rituals, your results become inevitable. Because now you're not relying on motivation. You're not riding the emotional roller coaster of feeling inspired one day and stuck the next. You've created a system, structure that holds you accountable to your highest self. The greatest performers in any field, from athletes to artists to entrepreneurs, don't leave their standards up to chance. They engineer their rituals so that excellence is a byproduct, not a surprise. You don't need more willpower. You need to make the high standard behavior automatic. The person who flosses every day doesn't think about flossing. It's who they are. The person who works out daily doesn't have to psych themselves up every time. It's part of their identity. And identity is everything. When you consistently execute rituals tied to higher standards, your identity evolves. You go from trying to be disciplined to, "I am a disciplined person." And when identity shifts, long-term change becomes effortless. The real magic happens when your standards and rituals start compounding. You start with one ritual, the morning routine that sets the tone. Then you stack another, a nutrition practice that fuels performance. Then another, a daily review of your goals. Over time, those rituals multiply. They create momentum. And that momentum becomes the foundation of transformation. The world starts to respond to you differently, not because the world changed, but because your energy, your clarity, and your standards are now undeniable. People around you might not understand it. They might tell you're obsessed, too intense, too focused. Let them. You're not here to live according to other people's standards. You're here to live according to yours. To demand more from yourself than the world demands from you. Because when you do that, you lead. You inspire. You elevate the room simply by walking into it. You raise the bar not just for yourself, but for everyone you touch. And it's not about perfection. It's about commitment. It's about recommitting every single day to the identity you're building, the future you're claiming, and the legacy you're creating. It's about holding yourself to a level of integrity that doesn't fluctuate with your emotions or your environment. It's about being the kind of person who does what needs to be done, especially when it's uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unseen. You don't need another year to change your life. You don't need to wait for perfect timing, permission, or proof. You already have everything you need inside you. What's been missing is ignition, a decision, a shift in identity, a refusal to accept anything less than the life you're capable of living. The moment you take full ownership of your mindset, your focus, your standards, your rituals, and your decisions, that's the moment your life begins to transform. This isn't about hype. It's about returning to your personal power. It's about getting brutally honest with yourself about what you've been avoiding, delaying, or tolerating. It's about understanding that clarity isn't going to show up on its own. You create it. Energy isn't something you stumble into. You generate it. Progress doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you consistently show up with focus, discipline, and purpose, no matter what life throws at you. Every breakthrough you're craving, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, lives on the other side of a simple but powerful choosing to stop living at the level of comfort and start living at the level of commitment. Because when you change what you believe is possible for you, when you shift how you speak to yourself, when you decide who you are and what you stand for, the world doesn't stay the same. Your relationships change, your energy changes, your future expands, the clock is ticking, and life will keep moving whether you evolve or not. But if you're ready to step into the arena, to rise above your patterns, to break the cycle once and for all, then stop negotiating with your limits and start building a life that demands your greatness. Change doesn't take time. It takes a decision. And that decision can be made today. Right now. This moment. Everything can change if you will. Will you?